Hi everybody! We're back to talk about the Elves today. And so let's just jump right into it. Oh my, here we go again with this. Alright, one thing that I wanted to mention before we jump into the Elves was that change we were talking about yesterday about the attrition cards. About making a change to how they're played. Initially this said that this card must be played at the beginning of your action phase, which, if you recall, the action phase includes the captain turn abilities and the play cards use activate ability steps. Okay, so if this was happening at the beginning of the action phase, it would be happening before captain turn abilities. And we discussed some of the things with the dwarven captains that made that less than desirable. But in addition, I really didn't want any card play happening before these turn abilities got used at all. So moving that into this step of the action phase is more in line with what I really did intend for that card anyway. So we're not really, making a fundamental change to what the intention was for it. You have your cards in your hand. You're not really doing anything with them when you're here. The captain turn abilities are going to affect things having to do with your hand, having to do with the game state. And a lot of them are designed to have that effect previous to you playing your cards and buying units or you're capturing units or whatever it is. So it's better to have that attrition happen here. But instead of saying, play this card during your play cards use activate abilities step, which would be cumbersome and would also require that a person have, a really clear knowledge of the steps of these phases by their name, whereas they're probably going to have more of an intuitive sense of these steps. We just said this card must be played before any other cards in your hand. Okay, so initially when you play the game, you're going to read through the turn sequence and you're going to realize that, first captain turn abilities happen, then you play cards. Okay, so you're not going to have to remember the name of that step or anything. You're just going to have a sense of that going forward, even if you forget what that step is called and everything. And then here, this card must be played before any other cards in your hand. It's saying it must be played before any other cards. It's not saying it must be played. You see, you may choose not to play any cards. And that's fine. If you want to dodge attrition by not playing any cards, go right ahead. Because all attrition does is make you discard cards. If you're not going to play any of them anyway, well then it had its effect. The whole point is that it's reducing the number of cards you can play. If you choose not to play any, you didn't get away with attrition, you just made it worse. You see, so you're not skating this detriment that's in your deck by doing that, so go ahead and do it. So the other way it said it must be played at the beginning of your action phase. So now it's like you have to do this thing. You don't have to do it, but if you want to play anything else, you have to do it. You see? So this change is a lot more in accord with what was intended. It also makes more sense. It's not as heavy-handed. It fits in better, and it's just all around a good move, I think. Okay? So now we can jump into our Elves with that resolved. Again, definitely an improvement to the game. That again, this thing of when to playtest. Clearly, you're supposed to be playtesting a game early, especially if you have new mechanisms. If you have mechanisms that are new, then you definitely want to make sure that you're testing them to see if they work. I mean, in a previous game that I had, one of the first ones that I had developed, I had a combat system that seemed to make perfect sense. Basically, a unit has an attack value, a unit has a defense value. When one unit attacks another, they're going to roll 2 dice, and they're going to add their attack value to it. The defender is going to roll 2 dice and add his defense value to it. And then if the attack is higher, the difference between those two numbers will be the damage. All right. Now, I think I've seen this kind of thing before. I can't think of a specific example, but maybe not. But when I actually tested this out, I just took a couple of dice, a couple of characters that I had written, and I just tested this out over 100 rolls. 77 rolls came up with 0 damage. Okay, so this thing that seemed to make perfect sense and you figure would be fair and would even itself out with the die rolls, 77 times out of 100 you get no damage. You can't have that. This game is going to go on forever if everybody's missing each other constantly. So something like that, which seems to make perfect sense, when you actually get down to it and do it, it falls apart. So, you know, if you come up with something, you definitely want to test it out. But here, you know, we're making a lot of changes previous to playing through the prototype that are definitely improvements. It's clear that, like what we just did there with the attrition card, is an improvement, is a refinement. Okay, that we didn't have to go through playtesting to recognize. Okay, so a lot can be recognized, and every single time I read through this thing, I find things that I want to refine. All right, now, again, we're prepping right now for playtesting. I'm preparing the prototype cards for the first round of playtesting, and I'm going to be videoing that so we can look at that together and see how everything that we've been looking at this whole time actually plays when we get it to the table. And it may fall apart in 2 minutes, or we may get a full game out of it. We'll see. But the, you know, a lot of times I come back and I look at this and I read something and it seems like an idiot wrote it. And meanwhile, at the time, it seemed like it made perfect sense. So, you know, this is a really, you know, kind of crazy endeavor where, you know, what seems to make sense in one moment just doesn't in another. And, you know, and so this refinement is an ongoing process. Okay, but I think we've made a lot of improvements here previous to even getting this thing to the table, just by, you know, using our experience of playing games and using, you know, a little bit of concentrated thought. Okay, so the Elves of Dawn Crest, as you could see, a little bit leaning on the cunning side. Okay, they are going to be more offensive than defensive by a pretty large margin, 14 strikes to only 6 evades in the deck. Okay, and so let's see how this looks as we get into it. All right, Ammar Yi, that's Dawn Crest's Ammar of War. We saw his quote on one of the previous cards. Basic unit cost of 4, so a little bit more expensive than average. But your basic units may use their cunning to pay comm costs. Okay, so they can use their cunning to capture units. All right, but that's only the basic units. Okay, which again is, you know, a lot of these abilities that we do on basic units can be a little bit more aggressive. There's a limit of how many basic units there are. There's only 10. So it's not going to affect everything in the game. It's just going to affect those 10 units, however often they happen to come into your hand. Okay, but they're going to be able to use cunning to pay comm costs. A guest of many foreign conclaves, Yi spent much time abroad honing his tactical insight before becoming the Dawn's Crest Ammar of War. Okay, so he's a very thoughtful, you know, strategic guy. Okay, his assault formation is the Cavalcade. If your comm and cunning ranks have equal assault power, add 2 to your total assault power. Okay, so you're just going to get a straight up bonus of 2 if you can get these two things to be exactly equal. Because remember, we are matching them, but that doesn't mean they have to be equal. You could have 7 combat and 5 cunning, and then that 5 that matches between the two is going to be the total assault power, and the remainder is just going to be like discarded, right? So, you know, here if you can actually get them equal, if you could have 5 and 5 with no remainders, you're going to get a bonus, 2. All right, and you can see the formation. It's an even lineup of the 2 ranks. Okay, the Cavalcade formation is a formal march that balances offensive and defensive capabilities. Okay, so it's kind of like that old school, you know, marching off to war in a straight line to face the enemy. All right, so the Cavalcade formation. All right, and this is a large, broad elf with full cheeks and ice green eyes, grim and steely, a dark, close-cut beard. Okay, and now Mentum Adrian. Okay, Mentum Adrian, basic unit cost is 3. At the beginning of your action phase, you may draw the top card of your deck, then place a card in your hand on top of your deck. Okay, so now this would be a way to kind of compensate for their limited number of evade cards. If you have an evade card in your hand that didn't get used on your opponent's turn, you would now be able to place that card on top of your deck for the following turn. That's one usage of this. Also, it helps you just refine your hand a little bit. If you see you kind of, you know, you got 5 cards in your hand and 4 of them are cunning and 1 are combat, you're not going to be able to capture anybody this turn anyway, so you might as well put that, you know, draw a new card, and maybe you'll get another cunning card, You can put that combat card back on your deck. Or maybe you draw a powerful combat card that in combination with the one you have is enough to capture somebody. And now you can just put a cunning card on top of your deck. All right, so it just helps you, refine a little bit. Mentum Adrian is the chief advisor at Dawn's Crest concerning all matters, public and private. Okay, so she's an advisor. They come to her to advise on matters of, we'll call it national import. There's no nation here per se, but you understand the idea. Or people might come to her when they have a problem. Hey, Mentum Adrian, my boyfriend is acting weird. This, that, and the other thing. She's there to serve in that capacity to anyone at any time. Okay, that's basically her function in this society. All right. Assault formation is the Birdseye. This formation ability activates first, whether attacking or defending, because if you recall, when we're doing formation abilities at the end of an assault, the attackers is going to activate first and then the defenders. In this case, whether attacking or defending, hers is going to happen first. Units in the center of your ranks cannot be destroyed. Okay, so if the opposing faction has an ability that allows them to destroy a unit, they won't be able to destroy any in the center. If they have an ability that targets center units, which one of them does, it's going to fall flat. Okay, and this is going to activate first to make sure that it can get around whatever the opponent's formation ability is. Because if the opponent's formation ability activates first, well then units in your center ranks cannot be destroyed, would be pointless, it already happened. Okay, so this way it's going to cover it, whether attacking or defending. The Birdseye Formation encircles a small group of units within a defensive ring, delivering them safely into the midst of the enemy ranks. So you could see, I symbolize it like this, that they're encircling a small group of units. So it's a way of delivering a specialized group of units. Like let's say you wanted to get detonation devisors into, the location and blow something up. Well, you have to protect them on the way in. Again, kind of like Helm's Deep, where they brought in that guy with the bomb. The Orcs brought in that guy with the bomb. So covering him to make sure he gets in. Okay? And that's why these center units are protected in this formation. Okay? A beautiful, regal female elf of middle age, wisdom in her eyes, with a silver tiara and long, straight silver hair. Okay? So wise advisor, Mentum Adrian. Okay? Or if you want to call him Mentum Adrian, I don't have a problem with that. You go right ahead. It's your own home. You buy this game. You do what you want with it. Okay. The Charm of Kinship is the artifact of the Elves, and we spoke about this previously. Cunning 4, so you're just going to get that huge cunning value right off the top. Of course, it's notorious, and it's an artifact, so it's captured instead of destroyed. In addition, you get this ability. You may play one unit you capture this phase. At the end of your action phase, place that unit into your captured pile. Okay, so we spoke about this. Using the charm to kind of hypnotize an enemy to do your will, and then you're going to capture it after that. In fact, you already did capture it. Now you're going to get to play it before putting it in your captured pile. Okay, so this mysterious artifact is said to have been created and used to effect the liberation of Redimere during the Monolithic Horde. So if you recall, again, in episode 9, we were talking about the lore book, we were talking about the Monolithic Horde, we were talking about the Deitor, who were the rebellious monolith who allied themselves with the native elves, men, and dwarves to fight off the other giants. And we said that, they had close relationships with the elves, and perhaps that influenced, their perspective. And so now we're suggesting that the Charm of Kinship may have had a hand in that as well. That maybe this charm helped them to sway the Deitor to their side. Of course, the Deitor had their own motivations, but this might have facilitated the alliance. Okay, and it's a light green metal charm with clear jewels on either side. Okay, and I've actually designed that, a preliminary design of it, which you can see. And it's based off some existing symbology for friendship and that kind of thing. Okay. All right, and then we have the Magic Mine. We've looked at this as well. Very cheap, 2 cunning. It doesn't do anything, though, except for this strike. All right, so it's a destruction strike. Randomly select a card from an opponent's hand. If it's a unit or equipment, destroy it. Destroy this card. Now, I really want to say then destroy this card. It just seems to make sense. Randomly select a card from an opponent's hand. If it's a unit or equipment, destroy it. Then destroy this card. But I felt like that then almost seemed like a qualifier that led one to believe that only if this happened you would destroy it. Like, you know, if it's a unit or equipment, destroy it, then destroy this card. Kind of like if this happens then, like an if then. You see what I'm saying? It's not if then. You destroy this card whether this happens or not. So that's why I stated it so bluntly there, even though it reads a little awkwardly. I felt it needed to be worded in that way to make sure you understand that this Magic Mind is going off. Whether it gets something or not is a secondary, you know, matter. Okay? So you're paying 2 for it. When you use it, it's one-time use no matter what happens. You're hoping it's a unit or equipment. Alright? Other than unit or equipment, you know, they might have tactics in their hands or elementals in their hand. So those are the only 2 things that would make this fall flat. Alright, but it's a chance you take, and it doesn't cost you much, and there's 4 of them, so you might get a few shots at this. Okay, one of the many experimental devices of the Elves, the Magic Mind stores the innate magic of an adept within an inanimate object. Now, I don't know if you would remember this from our look at the lore, but in the future, in the Emergence era, they're going to develop the ability to use magic via mechanical devices, such that non-adepts, muggles, I guess, as it were, would be able to use magic via equipment. And that's going to drastically change the world. And it's going to, after the Emergence era, into the modern era, you're going to see a big change in how the world looks. And it's going to lead to our main modern era game, the Magitech Mercenaries, okay, which are not necessarily all adepts, but they do have magic capabilities because of their tech equipment. Okay, so this is kind of a predecessor to that. This is an experimental device. This is in the fledgling days of this technology, and it's going to be developed by the Elves for good or ill. I mean, it's going to change the world. You know, it's a neutral tool. How it's used, you know, just like any technology, is going to be dependent on the character of the user. So it's going to have implications for good and ill. Alright, now as for attachments, the Elven Ring Blade, which I have a preliminary design for the Ring Blade just to remind myself of what I was thinking with this. It's a number of, well, here, I'll describe it here. 7 ring-shaped blades connected side to side to form a flat 3/4 circle with a loop handle on one side of the inner circle. Alright, so these outer rings are all blades. Okay, so it's a tricky weapon to use. And so you see here the flavor text. The ring blade is a weapon unique to Dawn's Crest and requires specialized training to wield effectively. And this is reflected by its ability. The attached unit gains +2 combat, or +4 if that unit is an elf. Okay, so the elves have the ability to really wield this weapon masterfully. Okay, but if not, you're still going to get +2. So if you're playing the dwarves, if dwarves and elves are playing in a team game and this weapon comes up, a dwarf can still use this, but he's only going to get +2 instead of +4. But since this is in the elves deck, elves will be participating in any game where this appears, and presumably they would want to grab this if they could. Alright, now we have the Remote Besieger. Okay, this is a construct attachment. We haven't seen this before. It has +3 cunning, +3 combat. It's a besieger, and this equipment may be played during assaults. Okay, so one of the few equipments that can be used during assaults. And you see, it's a pushcart contraption that lobs explosives like a tennis ball machine. All right. Now, a tennis ball machine doesn't exactly lob, but it looks kind of like that. It's something they're going to push out. It's a little box with a barrel, and it's going to fire these explosives out. Okay. So it has a strike ability, destruction. Select the unit in an opponent's discard pile with defense 4 or less to be destroyed. All right. So this is going to be able to kind of lob over the opponent's deck into his discard pile and blow somebody up. Alright, and so that's why this can be used during assaults. It has this +3 combat, which would be very useful during assaults. And it's an equipment that is kind of its own thing. As much as, you know, as much as it's an attachment, well, you see, this is a little tricky. If I'm making it an attachment, we don't really want to have attachments in assaults under any circumstances because we don't want to have to attach it to a unit per se. So, I mean, it's not a big deal if you played a unit and then you put this down on top of it, but we don't want to say that any units have an attachment on them in an assault. We just want to be like laying out our cards. That's why we have all units. We don't want to start putting swords on people and stuff, and then we have to, you know, read what those attachments do. I mean, this has a comm value, so it doesn't, you know, it's not reliant on an ability. But maybe we should not make this an attachment, because it doesn't do anything to the attached unit. You know, my idea was just somebody has to push this thing out and push the button, you know. But maybe we just need to think of this remote besieger as something that can act on its own, or maybe act remotely. I mean, it is remote. I mean, I was using remote in terms of the fact that it lobs these explosives a long distance. It was remote in the sense that it was far from what it's attacking. But I think maybe we need to think of it maybe remote in the sense that it can be operated remotely. Because if we're going to use it during assaults, we really don't want it to be an attachment. So we'll just let it be a construct maybe. And then we'll move it out of the ranged attachment area and bring it into the regular equipment. Yeah, we just really don't want attachments in our assaults. Even let's take a look at that catapult. See, this isn't being called an attachment, even though when it's used to fortify it becomes permanently attached to the location. It's not being considered an attachment. It's just an item. Alright, so yeah, I think I feel better about it this way. Okay. Alright, so yeah, let's leave it like that for now. Okay, now we're into the tactics. Now the Elves have very strong tactics. That's one of the characteristics of their faction group, and so you'll see instead of that usual spread of 1 here, they have a spread of 2. It's that much more difficult to overcome the Elves' tactics. Alright, collaborative effort. Draw a card. Alright, so straight up you're going to be able to draw a card. In addition, if 2 or more units are played this phase, your units gain +1 comm. Okay? So we'll just say all your units gain +1 comm just to be clear. Focus down that target. He's only got 2 arms. Principal Defender Dagon, who's one of the elf captains that we'll see later. Alright, so the idea here is that we're going to gang up on somebody. So if 2 or more units are played this phase, all your units gain +1 combat. But if you don't have 2 or more units, then you're still going to get to draw a card. In addition, drawing a card may help you acquire that second unit. Because it's if 2 or more units are played this phase at any point. When we use this terminology, and this is described in the rulebook specifically, when we use the terminology or played this phase, it means it could be previous to playing this card or after playing this card, anytime during the phase. So if you draw a card, even though you played this already, this effect is still going to give this bonus to units played after this card was played. Alright. Okay, concealed approach, we looked at that previously, gives you a little combat and cunning. Strikes cannot be evaded this phase. Alright, so we gave it this extra ability, because previously this is all it did. When you launch an assault against a fortified location this turn, you may destroy this card to resolve the assault immediately without placing a marching token. We spoke on this extensively, but you may not be making an assault this phase. Now yes, you do get the common cunning. So really it didn't need to have this, but I thought it made sense that with concealed approach, strikes cannot be evaded this phase. You're concealed, and so when you move in to do a strike, it's not evaded because they don't see you until it's too late. Okay. I also changed this flavor text. I didn't like the way it read previously, but the idea is the same. An elven blade arrives on the wind. A Redimere proverb. Okay, previously it said something like, to die by an elf blade is to die by the wind. Alright, and I just thought that sounded a little weird. So now an elven blade arrives on the wind. It's kind of a proverb, so it sounds a little, you know, strange in that way, but it's, you know, it's to say that you don't see it coming. Okay, it's as if it just came on the wind. It came out of nowhere. You didn't see the guy who was wielding it. Alright, so it suggests the often, you know, stealthy nature of the elves. Alright, 5 elves cleverly camouflaged in the brush around a structure or camp. Hidden picture hard to find. We talked about that. Okay. And the shot in the dark. Okay, another one that we have seen previously, an early card in this set. +1 combat because it's a shot. It has the strike ability, destruction. Reveal the top card of an opponent's deck. If it's a unit, destroy it. Otherwise, place it in its owner's hand. So again, you see us getting at the opponent's deck and destroying a unit. But if it's not a unit, you're going to place it in its owner's hand, and that represents the risk associated with a shot in the dark. Shot in the dark implies risk. This is the risk. You may give the enemy a card. Okay, so even if he doesn't evade this, if it's not a unit, you're going to have to place this in his hand. Okay. All right. Now into the basic units for the elves. The Starborn Sharpshooter, +1 combat, +1 cunning. Nice little balance. Has the assault ability, and it can be used to fortify. Choose the last unit in your opponent's calm or cunning ranks. That unit is discarded. Okay, so only going to affect the last unit, but again, you can play this at any time during the assault, so it's whatever the most, whatever the last unit is at that point. So you can kind of choose when you want to use this. It doesn't have to be at the end of the assault. All right. The Starborn Swordbearer. Okay, +2 combat, no cunning, and that's it. Okay, so this is just a +2 combat unit for the elves. The art of swordplay resides in anticipating an opponent's actions and responding correctly when you're inevitably wrong. That's Yi, the wise Ammar of war at Dawn's Crest. Okay. And then the Psychonautical Navigator. Okay. So +2 cunning, and it has the evade destruction. Your opponent acquires an attrition. Okay, that's not correct. This should be. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's not a strike. It's not a strike. See, typically if this was a strike, this would have to be an attrition strike because your opponent acquires an attrition. But since it's an evade with a destruction ability, it can do whatever it wants. What we're saying here is that if you evade a destruction strike, they're going to acquire an attrition. All right, and the Psychonautical Navigator has to do with like mind play and stuff like that. You can see it here. What business have you in the mind of others? Whatever business they are not tending to themselves. And that's from Dresden, the Sorceress Beguiler, another captain of the Elves. Okay, so what we're saying here is that they're going to attempt to make a destruction strike, and if they miss, you're going to be kind of playing with their head, and you're going to get this attrition effect. So they're gonna miss, and then they're gonna, whatever happens, and they're going to basically fall out of the fight, so to speak. All right, so there's gonna, have an attrition effect on the enemy. Okay. All right, so now we're into the faction units. The Architect of Encounters. All right, this is kind of a tactical, field officer. +2 combat, +3 cunning. Pretty strong considering there's 5 of them in the deck. You may discard this card to search your deck for 1 tactics card, reveal it, and place it into your hand. Then shuffle your deck. So we're getting a little deck searching here. But you have to discard this card to do it. Let's just say from your hand, because what we want to say is you can do this instead of doing this. Either this officer is out fighting or recruiting, or it's doing this. It's back in the tent, coming up with tactical, maneuvers. Okay, so this helps you grab a tactic, and remember that, that the elves are kind of known for their tactics. Okay, actions are merely the expression of intent. The real battle is in the mind. That's from Arch Warrior Seal, another one of the captains. Okay, so this is a field leader soldier. Okay. All right, so the Covert Demolitions Expert. Okay, so we have +2 combat, +2 cunning. With the Destruction Strike, reveal a card fortifying an opponent's location. If it has defense 6 or less, destroy it. The Covert Demolitions Expert, my work is a kindness. They never know what hit them. Okay, so we're going to be able to target a fortifying unit. All right, so we might want to play this right as we're about to make an assault, if we can time it right, to potentially remove one of those fortifying units. Okay, so this is one of those rare cards that's going to give you access to these units, but you're going to be taking a chance here. You're going to reveal it, and if it has defense 6 or less, destroy it. Now, 6 is kind of a mid-range figure. I mean, you know, maybe slightly on the high end, but not too much. And so, you know, you have a fair shot at this working, but it's no guarantee. Okay, but if not, you still get your +2 combat or +2 cunning. Okay, and the detonation divisor, we've looked at this. +2 cunning has the strike ability, destruction. Choose an opposing unit in the active field, destroy that unit and any opposing units adjacent to it. Okay, so this is getting at the active field and removing units that would be potentially available for purchase. But what you do have to consider with this is that you are removing, you know, possibly multiple cards from the active field, which would expedite the arrival of the next captain. Okay, because at the end of your turn, you're always going to refill any missing cards from the active field, be it from your own faction's row or the opposing faction's row. If there's less than 4 cards there, you're going to refill them. All right, and it also is usable for this ability during assaults. Destroy the last unit played by your opponent. Okay, so just straight up, whatever the last card is they put down, you're going to have a chance to destroy it. So again, you'd want to time this. There's a 98% chance that the device will function as expected. The other 2% is why you should stand way over there. All right, that's the detonation divisor. Okay, and you see I kind of think of him as crafty elf saboteur, G.I. Joe tunnel rat kind of look, if you remember that character. Tunnel rat. All right. So now, Executor Sentry. This is their unique, notorious unit. Okay. Cost 7, which is going to give them that VP 2. Cunning 4. All right, and has the ability to fortify. Choose a unit in your discard pile. Gain cunning equal to that unit's cunning value. Okay. So. Executive Sentry, well, let's just see it. Executive Sentry has amassed a large body of work examining the remote transference of information via a universal mind shared by all sentient life. Okay, so now he works under Ammar Yi, who we're going to see in the captains. In the, you know, she is the Ammar of applied ethereology. Okay, so dealing with metaphysical things. All right, so this remote transference of information is going to account for that rise in cunning. But he already has 4, and now he's going to be able to get that much more. So this is the kind of unit that would allow you to recruit another high-cost unit or possibly multiple units on a turn. Okay, in addition, very useful during assaults because of that high cunning value. All right. Let's see. Okay, good. So now the Mystic Diversioner, +2 combat, +3 cunning. Okay, another pretty strong unit here for the elves. Has the evade destruction ability. You may choose another player to be the target of the evaded strike. All right, so the Diversioner. Now the Mystic Diversioner is a character from another game that I have in the Emergence era. All right, and what it does is it you know, it diverts, you know, the efforts of the enemy. And so here you can use this to evade a strike, but if it's a destruction strike, you can target it at another player, be it the one who made the strike, or if it's in a team game, their teammate. Okay, and depending on what the strike does, you know, you may want to target it, you know, at a teammate. If it does something that for some reason might serve a purpose, you have that opportunity. Attention is the conduit of thought. Executive Sentry. Conferencer of the Anima. Okay. Hiding elf mystic, creating the illusion of a Gorgolith in front of a distant orc, while a foreground orc aims a bow at it. Alright, so you can see he's creating an illusion to divert the attention of an enemy, but even more so, if an enemy tries to shoot that illusory Gorgolith, he's going to actually shoot his own ally. Alright, and that kind of reflects this evade ability where you may have a strike targeted back at the faction that delivered it. Okay, and now we're into the captains. First we're going to see Ammar Yi. Okay, defense is 10, pretty low. The arrival effect is all players place their deck into their discard pile. Then each opponent places a tactics card from their discard pile on the bottom of their faction deck. So this is going to basically just make all their cards available, whatever's not in their hand, because tactics wouldn't be in the reserves or fortifying. They would either be in their hand, in their deck, or in the discard pile. By putting their deck into their discard pile, all their tactics that aren't in their hand are going to be there. And then they're going to choose one of those tactics to put at the bottom of their faction deck, effectively removing it from the game, unless you got to the bottom of the faction deck, although we had discussed possibly making that an end game condition. Okay, so if the faction deck runs out, it would be the end of the game. And so this is basically going to just remove that tactic from the game. Alright, the turn ability, you may destroy a card in your discard pile. If you do, shuffle your discard pile into your deck. Alright, so you see how this plays off the arrival ability. All players place their deck into their discard pile. So that means you are as well, and your team is as well. Alright, so after that, your deck is in your discard pile, and now you may destroy a card in your discard pile. So that's going to give you the opportunity to destroy any attritions you might have, maybe some elemental cards you want to get rid of to thin your deck. But if you do this, you're going to shuffle your discard pile into your deck, because this is going to happen every turn. So we just want to make sure that you're going to not have that discard pile available again, let's say, and so you're going to create your deck again out of your discard pile. And this could also be a benefit because cards that you purchased are going to come out sooner. Because of this, you're not going to have to wait for your deck to run out to shuffle them back in, because you discarded your deck into your discard pile. Alright, and now you can activate this ability, choose an opponent to destroy a random card in their discard pile. Alright, so now you just had them dump their deck into their discard pile. If you immediately activated this, then you would be able to have them destroy another card in the discard pile at random. So who knows what it'll be. Sonori, Ammar of Applied Ethereology, is the youngest elf to ever hold a seat on the Circle of Ushers at Dawn's Crest. Okay, and she's going to become an important character going forward, even into the Great Mage War, and we discussed some of that in previous videos. Okay, young, vibrant, light-skinned, brave, intelligent, but somewhat eccentric, elf female with long blue-white hair and no stark appearance of cosmetics, kind of a natural look for her. Okay, so again, like a spiritually, metaphysically focused elf Ammar. And then we have Archwarrior Seal, 13 combat. The arrival effect, each opponent destroys a unit in their hand or acquires an attrition. Okay, so they're going to have that choice. If they have a really good unit in their hand, they have only good units in their hand, they don't want to destroy any, they can take an attrition instead. Either way, it's going to do something to them. And then on the turn, you may destroy a card in your hand. If you do, draw a card. Alright, so again, giving you that ability to kind of thin your deck. And this is going to happen every single turn. Okay, so now you're destroying a card in your hand. So you are weakening that hand. Even if you're destroying an elemental, you're losing that +1 combat or +1 cunning. It's helping you thin your deck, but it's coming from your hand, not your discard. So that kind of softens it a little bit since it's happening every single turn. But then you are going to draw another card to replace it. So, that could be good or bad, depending. I mean, if you happen to draw an attrition with this, then it would be bad. If you happen to draw a better card than the one you just destroyed, it would be good. So, we don't know. But you will have that opportunity every turn. You don't have to do it. And then activate, place an attrition from an opponent's discard pile into their hand. Okay, so here you potentially gave them an attrition. And if you did, then you might want to activate this because it's going to be in their discard pile. When they acquire an attrition, it goes to the discard pile. You might want to activate this right away to put that attrition into their hand. The outlandish battlefield tactics of Archwarrior Seal weave confusion amongst the enemy ranks, crippling their ability to organize. Okay, so that's why we're getting these, attrition effects. Okay. All right, a pale, pink-skinned albino elf hunched, roguish, with white multi-banded ponytail. Okay, so the elves are a dark-skinned race. Alright, so he's going to stand out as like an albino elf. Alright, he's going to look kind of strange. Okay, and then he also, you know, has outlandish battlefield tactics. So he's a bit of like, you know, a strange elf. Alright, and then we have Dresden, the sorceress beguiler. Alright, at 12, the arrival, each opponent randomly discards 2 cards. If both of those cards are elementals, that player returns those cards to their hand and discards all other cards in their hand. Okay, so you're going to do it randomly, so they can't avoid this necessarily. You see what I mean? You know, if they knew this was coming and they had the choice of which 2 cards to discard, then they wouldn't do 2 elementals, even though they want to. But you're going to do it randomly. If they happen to both be elementals, they're going to get those 2 back and they're going to lose everything else. Okay? So again, the Sorcerer's Beguiler, he's like really, you know, things are getting kind of crazy. You see what I'm saying? He's like, you thought you were discarding these 2 elementals, but no, now you're getting them back and you're discarding everything else. It's like, you don't know what's going on. Okay, so the turn ability, you may reduce the com value of all cards you play this turn to 0. If you do, you may pay all defense using cunning. Okay, so now this is kind of a, you know, a similar effect to what Ammar Yi was giving you. If you choose him as the faction leader, he said that basic units can pay com costs with cunning. Most defense values are going to be com costs, but that's only basic units. Here you can do this every turn. You can reduce your combat to 0, and if you do, you may pay all defense using cunning. Alright, so if you have a weak combat hand, you can use cunning to pay defense costs. Okay. And then activate, choose an opponent to place all elemental cards from the discard pile on top of their deck. Okay, so now, you know, if, you know, let's say you had something like Ammar Sonori, all players place their deck into their discard pile. If she just came out and Dresden was out already, then you might want to activate this effect to choose an opponent to place all elemental cards from their discard pile on top of their deck. So now they're going to be getting all of those weak cards coming up in the next turn or 2. Alright. He spun a spell in way of fun, and there the trouble had begun. An excerpt from Murgo's Mystery, a children's tale amongst the elf people. Okay, so that kind of reflects what Dresden is all about. He's a sorcerer's beguiler, kind of, almost a Joker at times, you know, where he's doing things to you where you know, like practical jokes kind of thing, you know, where you know, you're getting screwed over, but he's having fun at your expense. Okay, a smirking sorceress elf. All right, and now we have Godra. Okay, now this character Godra, you can see was inspired by Janice Freeman. If you happen to know who she is, she's a contestant on The Voice, and when I saw her, I was just so inspired by like her presence, just the way she looked. You know, sometimes I see people. It's kind of like that Time magazine cover, you know, with the woman with the light eyes and the hood, or whatever. You know, it's like there's certain people who just, to me, like just, I don't know, reflect humanity somehow, like some quality of the human spirit, you know. And I was inspired when I saw Janice Freeman, just by her physical presence. I mean, her ability to sing is incredible, but you know, just her as a person, you know. And so I got this idea for the character Godra. Perhaps the most talented and versatile combatant at Dawn's Crest, Godra's strategic insight, martial prowess, and mastery of magic make her a wonder to her allies and a terror to her enemies. Alright, so she's got, you could say, defense 14. She's one of the strongest elf captains. Alright, so she's like this, you know, this top tier, you know, combatant for the elves. And she, you know, when I first saw Janice Freeman, she looked kind of like a superhero with what she was wearing, you know, and, you know, and so this character, you know, when I got the idea for this character, I thought of her. And I said, that's got to be it. So she's gonna be based heavily on her physically. Okay, so the arrival ability, all opponents gain an attrition. Boom, that's it. They're just all gonna get one. There's no tricks to it. All right, and then the turn ability, draw cards until you draw a card with no com value. Okay, so who knows? That could be a lot of cards. It could be one card. We don't really know. But this is going to happen every single turn. So you're going to have a shot at getting a lot of cards while she's out. And she's going to be hard to take down with this 14 defense. Activate. Choose a tactics card in your discard pile and place it into your hand. Alright, so it's pretty strong abilities here in terms of, you know, it says a 1/2 are allies and a terror 2 are enemies. Okay, so, I mean, a 1/2 are allies for sure. You're getting all these cards. You know, you're able to grab a tactic card of your choice right when you want it. And a terror 2 are enemies. She comes out and immediately attrition. People do not want to be involved with this fight. Okay, alright, and the 14 gives you VP 6. We said 13 to 14 was going to get you 6. And then lastly we have Principal Defender Dagon. Dagon commands the Dawn's Crest Defenders, an elite grouping of warriors that are highly trained and equipped with state-of-the-art combat apparatus. Okay, now, interestingly enough, we don't have any Dawn's Crest Defenders in our units, which is a little weird, because here he is, the commander of this organization, and then we don't have any representatives of the organization. So we might want to look at that. I might want to go see if there's somebody I can change to be a Dawn's Crest Defender, or I might have to just remove a unit and make Dawn's Crest Defenders. We'll see how that goes. They probably could use a little defense, seeing how, you know, they're limited on their evades, but I don't want to give them more evades, so I don't know. I'll have to think about that a little bit. Formidable fantasy shock trooper with copper-capped head, shoulder armor, goatee, and cape. Okay. The rival ability, each opponent reveals their hand and discards all cards with a strike ability. Okay, so you can think of him almost like a cop, kind of. Alright, the Principal Defender, he, you know, he's going to limit the opponent's ability to strike. So again, mitigating that lack of evade in this faction group. And they're going to discard all cards with a strike ability in their hand. Okay. And then on a turn, you may place an evade card from your hand or discard pile on top of your deck. So again, getting more out of those few evade cards that you do have. Okay. And again, if let's say Ammar Yi just came out and you had your entire deck in your discard pile, you would have, you know, your choice of the lot. Okay. And activate for 1 influence, you may destroy up to 2 cards in your hand and or discard pile. Alright, so now giving you that further ability to kind of refine your deck. We've seen a lot of that in the Elf faction group. Okay, alright, and VP 6 for Principal Defender Dagon. Alright, so that's the Elves for now. Aside from maybe these Dawn's Crest Defenders, I don't see much here that has to be changed. I think that we're in shape going forward. I'm not probably going to be using this faction group for the first playtest, so this change isn't going to affect my current work on the prototype cards. And we'll see where this lands going forward. I'll definitely check back and let you know if I create these units. Okay, so that's it for the Elves. We're not looking at these expansion factions. We're not getting into expansions just yet. So next time when we come back, we're going to be moving over to the unified Orc war clans and taking a look at their faction cards. Alright, enjoy the day. Thanks for checking in. I'll see you soon.